Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to talk about something that's been going on for many years and interestingly has been announced by the number one Satanist in this country, the most popular Satanist, EA Koetting, who has come out and stated that his mentor, the person who trained him and who he works for and who he got his start with, is Karl Welz of Magitech. Isn't that interesting? Magitech, Chi generator, Mr. Orgonite, is a Satanist and has been training people and involved with it for years. Well, of course I know this because I originally went into business with him many, many years ago. That when I opened the original guild, which was a research organization of different people looking for information, this turned into, or not turned into, I started with him what was called the International Guild of Sorcery, which was to take products and market them. So that we could generate enough money as a general business to try and have money for our research, as well as try and make some income, because like everything, you need to have income to function properly. So we worked together for a short period of time. I met Welsh many years ago. Was attracted to his rune course as an interesting and different rune course that was out there. He had basically what he had was the Armenin system, the 18 runes that he had his own version of, basically based on Spielberger's work, who took the Armenin runes and made them more neutral instead of the racist Nazi doctrine that the Armenins basically have. Of course, Welz is Austrian. He is not German. He has a strange and unusual history, claiming a bunch of things that we really don't know. If any of his claims of education or anything else, he certainly has a mediocre background in terms of magic and everything else, and always had this strange hidden dark side, which was to come out further, and always was a troublemaker and basically did nothing within the organization. At that particular time, which is many, many years ago, you're talking around 1980 and early, when all this started, to the mid-80s, when I think the International Guild of Sorcery was originally put together. And of course, I did everything. I formed everything. He had nothing. He had no printing equipment. He had a pen printer. He was supposed to take over writing a monthly newsletter. Of course, he could never do that. He was an unemployed contractor, apparently, at that time, and had nothing going on and was trying to get into other things. Part of his thing was putting together what was going to become his muffler-looking chi machine. And he talked about this laughingly, how he would put one of these little gadgets together and sell it to the public. Something that I was not in favor of, even though this was a time when we were looking into and had contacts with many people of getting into what is now called techno-shamanism. But he had no background in this of any great degree. Being an Austrian, of course, and they seem to be so egocentric, he was involved in the dark aspects of Orgon. Of course, Wilhelm Reich was Austrian. So, and of course, we know what came from Austria and where they even are today as one of the still Nazi-type philosophies that you get out of Europe. Well, that's pretty much centered in Austria, which is still, and they still have all sorts of Nazi monuments and then their graveyards and everything else. I mean, this is really a nasty country with their buddies, the Germans, of course, which they, of course, have a leash on and do whatever they want. So this is needs to be understood. So he came from that interesting area there, and of course at that particular time I was interested and had been studying the runes for several years through different groups and English groups and so forth, the Odenic Rite and other people which were trying to find, well, is there something from Europe runic of any value? So I was looking into his. He had these little pamphlets for the 18 runes, which he used to sell. I don't know, they were like $7 or so. It's just like a one piece of paper that is folded into a little pamphlet with printing on both sides. So, from what he told me, these are almost exact copies of Spiesberger's book, which is still available today. Everyone who wants to get into that, Runen Magic is the name of it, and it is available in German if you're interested in it. So there was nothing overly original there or anything else, and it was done with his usual very poor quality and follow-up. So he was advertising everywhere trying to sell these courses because he needed to make money. And I don't know what kind of following he got or not, but back then there really wasn't much on this. I mean, Blum's book, I believe, had just come out, and there really wasn't any magical systems. We had Edred Flowers, who basically just copied German books, and his information there. And of course, he's interesting enough as another person who's a Satanist. So as you get into all these things, what is it all about, and what was he getting involved in? So we worked together for a while and tried to get things going. Of course, I had to invest a lot of time and money doing this, and he did absolutely nothing, hoping that he would be able to ride on my coattails, of course, and not invest a penny. I also connected with the Robert Blanchard, who would ultimately become a Grand Master of the Order, and of course he's the #1 occult translator in history, being an occultist and a talented translator, and translated most of the grimoires that are out there today have come from his translations. And of course I put that all together working with him, and he was such a great guy and donated his time and did everything he could. He also wrote for the organization, did all sorts of wonderful things, unlike Welz, who did absolutely nothing. He came out with this bizarre little version of course he'd come out with a book based on Contact with Satan, a book on Faust. This was a book we took together, and I was marketing, had placed ads and everything else, because grimoires, you got to remember back then, grimoires and everything else were very difficult to obtain. This is pre-internet, but in general, finding grimoires was very difficult. You had to search the world for them. This wasn't the time of print on demand and people putting out a lot of books. Somebody had to spend a lot of money, print a few hundred copies, and then hope to sell them. And of course, selling was not internet-based. Selling was based in putting ads in magazines, people writing to you, sending you checks, which you then had to hold for 3 weeks to let the check clear, because you never know if someone was trying to steal from you. Then, of course, there became phone, of course, orders when people had credit cards, and then you could get a credit card processor. But that was pretty advanced in the middle to late 80s, unlike it is today with PayPal and everything else, which has really allowed just about anybody to get payments anywhere in the world. So all of this was there, and he had absolutely no money, he had no job prospects, he had nothing at all. We even talked about him possibly moving to California so that he would live with me. At that particular time, he was claimed to be married to a black woman who was very demanding on him. So she wanted good stuff, and he couldn't do it. So this, I believe, was his second marriage. He has children with another person as well, I believe. So we went on with this, tried to figure out how we're going to do this. I put everything together. I was investing everything, and he was supposed to come in and never wrote a single word for the journal. And of course, that's what people did in those days. You basically started an organization, which was the International Guild of Sorcery, and then you had a bi-monthly or monthly journal that you sold to people as part of the membership. And then, of course, you put out other products, and it also would serve as an advertising medium, which you would find people, and then obviously the journal would let people know of your new products. So this book came out, and of course, he couldn't follow through with it. He was supposed to print it, staple it, etc. It was cheaply done, stapled in the center type, I think they call that saddleback, in terms of the actual printing of it. And I had ads running and had like 25 or 30 orders for this particular interesting grimoire. And of course, he could not fulfill his basic duties of supplying these because he was supposed to do that, and I filled the orders and so forth. At that time, we had just started out. He also caused a lot of problems with Robert Blanchard, trying to get him in arguments with me, making false statements about him. All sorts of things were going on there, so he could kind of come in there and break that up. He also wanted to move things in this whole black magic area. Well, makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Well, the point is that what was really going on with him and what he didn't want to come out with. You got to remember, in the 80s, in the middle to late 80s, Satanism was really looked down upon. This is what the Satanism scandals, when they were being looked into for all of their evil doings, child molesting, etc., which turned out to be, of course, 100% true. So he was dancing around. That knew very well that I was not interested in that area whatsoever. Of course, grimoires are all on the dark side. They all come from hundreds of years ago, and you're certainly not going to sell these puffy little books to people. They were pulp fiction in a lot of ways, grimoires, and they were for sale. People were selling these to make money. So you're not going to generally find these grimoires that don't have these darker aspects. Like today, this has a certain interest and appeal. It's secretive and dirty. So everybody kind of likes those. And grimoires are filled with demonic contacts, etc. And of course, demons tend to be those kind of spirits that work in this low-level world. You want money, sex, success? Well, you don't go and ask angels to get you a piece of tail on Saturday. So the whole idea is that it makes sense. And there's, of course, a level to this. And, of course, grimoires were agricultural societies and talked about the use of animals, etc. And, of course, we kill billions of animals anyway. So the whole idea is that while this is nothing that we condoned or told people to do, this is historical fact. And of course, we left a lot of that kind of stuff in there, usually with some sort of caveat. But this little book came out and was floating around Europe for a long time, particularly in Austria and other places. And of course, he just grabbed the local edition of it and translated it. Whoever originally put that out is unknown. There has been many copies of books about Faust that are magically based. So it's really nothing new, and nor is that a very intriguing story. Everybody knows that kind of old Faustian story, but this was supposed to be more grimoire based. Again, it's nearly impossible to prove if this had any intrinsic value to it. I found it to be an interesting book to some degree, and when he was unable to fulfill his agreement with me about this book that we jointly owned, I had it rewritten, parts of it, by Blanchard, who then went in and filled in other things, and we've added lots of material since that. But the fact is he could never come through with it, and this caused all sorts of problems. He was too interested in making his own money for himself with his own little tinker toys that he used to laugh about making and selling to the public. These muffler-looking tools that he got were quite amusing, and of course, first generation of what he considered his type of orgone based on his Austrian buddy. So he moved ahead in that area. We were going in our other areas, publishing books. We produced our own instruments based in a magical understanding through the originator of magical radionics, Charles Cosamato, who we were publishing his books and new books that we asked him to write. So we were selling these, and these, of course, were base level units as well. Haven't changed much from a lot of manufacturers. Of course, we have changed these and have very updated units now. But this was an area we were getting into, and it was becoming relatively popular. Now, there were a few radionic manufacturers in the United States, but nobody was really doing it metaphysically. These were all based in what would be considered healing. So that's what radionics is all about, and that's what it was used from England. It was used pre-England. Of course, it was started in the United States. It was then pushed out to England because of laws against it. And then, of course, it kind of came back, and people had several different machines and other things out there. So there was a lot going on in that area, and of course, the original, after this went on, I'm not sure how many years that went on for, but it went on for a few years, and we decided to drop that and move into something that was a little more into what we were, and to move away from what was then kind of fouled by Welz, which is the entire sorcery. And we use the word sorcery guild because this meant a non-religious magical system. Sorcery is one of those words that people misunderstand, but that's it. If you call yourself other names, there was always a religious understanding to it, whether that was good or bad religion. So we were into technology, and that's it, period. That's why we use the term sorcery. But it was a limiting term. So we eventually, that organization was closed, and I opened up and put together the International Guild of Occult Sciences, which actually was a 501c nonprofit organization. It was an official nonprofit at that time, and that's where we moved ahead with our new authors, many of our published books, and all the money I had to pour into it myself as well to get all these things going, working 2 jobs to empower everything. Everything takes money, and while we were doing well, it takes time to build everything, especially with the cost, and especially if you're doing everything yourself. So we parted ways back then because he refused to do anything, plain and simple. And he was into different things. So what does it come out here to all of this? So, I mean, that's the real history. But things are a lot darker than that. Not only did he try to cause all sorts of problems with my other associates, there always was this hidden and suspected black magic reality. Why did he come up with a grimoire against dealing with the devil? Because he was looking into this. What is his dark path? Well, what people don't understand is that there is a huge amount of Satanism throughout the world, and particularly in Europe, etc., with their Nazi overtones. Now, people don't understand that that has changed for quite some time now, and it's not something that is based in, quote, the Nazi, which is basically Arabic ethics, saying that they're the superior race, which is amusing since they're Arabs. It's based on the fact of satanic beliefs and money. So that was something that was done so that the Nazis could loot people's bank accounts and fund their wars. They had absolutely no demonizing or had any problems really with Judaism. After all, it's just another Arab tribe. But who had all the money? Well, the Jews had all the money. So that's all changed, of course, and we all know that the bankers, which tend to be linked to Jewish, fund both sides. But it's all of them. All bankers do this. That's how the world works. You can't fight wars without money. So how did they get this money? Well, there is certain American industrialists who sold more oil to the Nazis than they did to the Americans in World War II. And they were put on trial and, of course, get away with everything. These are the same people that are in finances today who caused the housing problems and everything else. So here we go yet again. But all of this links together, and it is not something that is pretty much racially based now, because that was so bogus It wasn't even funny. That was always a bogus thing, and especially the fact that people somehow want to use this term white power. Americans like to use that when the Germans are Arabs. They're Iranians. It's hilarious. And of course, if you look at World War II history, all they did was group together with, quote, non-whites and attack the whites. So it's kind of funny if you want to classify that. But it's all very amusing. But the point is, this ties into all of this Austrian demonic stuff that he was heavily involved in Austria. I come to find out that this was a huge interest to him. He was involved in all of the satanic societies that were based in Germany and Austria. Like so many of these other people that are connected to this, which we will talk about as well. Edred Flowers, otherwise known as Thorson, was connected to all this and doesn't exactly hide it, but I don't know how many people know it. So the line here is that now the most popular Satanist of our time, EA Koetting, and his organization, has been trained by and works with Karl Welz. He states it himself. This isn't something, or anything that I've stated here is not something that I have contrived or made up because of bad blood or whatever you want to call it. This is the facts, and people don't like to hear facts, and they state that it's being bitter or whatever. It's not have anything to do with being bitter. The fact is that